All right, everybody. So now we're getting into the long-awaited. So here's Mirza Bigg's book right here, New Dimensions in Sociology. Now, before we get into the book, I'm going to explain how I discovered Mirza. So here we are. Here's how I discovered Mirza. Now, the term. Here's the engram for the term Physico-Chemical. So right around 19, the term Physico-Chemical started being used in literature, and it started increasing. So when Mirza learned, when he was being educated in 1950 to 1970, the term Physico-Chemical is starting to rise. And I think in the years after, the term physical chemistry started to be used. So in my early years of research, I would look up the term physical-chemical sociology. So now then I started, in about 2013, I started searching in Google Books for anyone who's ever written on physical-chemical sociology, physical-chemical economics, physical-chemical philosophy. And so that's where I discovered Mirza Big. So when I discovered him on 13 May 2014 by Google searching the term physical-chemical chemical sociology. And thereafter, Mirza became the 3,263rd article of HMLpedia. And so that's very strange that I could write over 3,000 articles and not discover Mirza's work. But so if we click on the term physical-chemical sociology, we see that the term was, so here we have this is Mirza right here, Mirza Big, and he's looking through the microscope in terms of people as molecules. And likewise, there's Libb, Thims, or Mirza Big looking through this is macroscope, is looking at society, and this is microscope, that's looking at things, micro interactions. So I did more of this in my book, Human Chemistry. I spent a lot more time on micro interactions. Mirza spent a lot more time on macro interactions for social systems. And here we have different people, chemical bonds here of different people. For example, family. And we find that the term physical-chemical sociology. So Mirza, if you write your second edition of your book, I think you should just call it physical-chemical sociology. Because this was coined in 1943 by Harvard founding sociologist Peter Sorkin. He's the person who founded the sociology department at Harvard. And he was the person who kind of attacked physical-chemical sociology and ridiculed it. But he wrote a whole book on this called Contemporary Sociological Theories. So he wrote what's called the Mechanistic school. So when he wrote this book in 1928, he said the Mechanistic school of modern sociology is comprised of social mechanics, social physics, and social energetics, and the mathematical sociology of Pareto. And so the work that Big does is similar to Alfred Lotka. This is kind of, they use Spiro Harrod, use thermodynamics. Henrik Carey used a little bit of energy, but then he also calls this social energetics or social thermodynamics. So we have Wilhelm Oswald is a little similar, and Leon Winiarski is one of the first persons to apply the Clausius inequality to social phenomena. So that's similar to what Big did. Okay, so on 13 May 2014, I discovered Mirza Big on Google search, and I looked up and I found a copy of his book on Amazon, which is this copy here. So then I finished reading the book on June 14, 2014. I did a first reading of his book, and I knew right off the bat that this was something great that I had found. And then on July 8th, I scanned the book and made this PDF file that we're going to look at shortly, which has my annotations in it. And then here we are in 2019 with my first visit with Mirza Beg. So now I've read through his book twice, and I used it, as we've discussed. I've cited his book over 170 times in HMOpedia. So here's one of my first reactions to reading Mirza's book. Jeff Tutton, I helped him complete his PhD in thermodynamics applied to aquatic systems, so fish and rivers. And he was, before, back in 2014, we were working together, and I told him that the book I would seriously recommend, if you can get a copy of it, is Mirza Beg's 1987 New Dimensions. I said, where he treats society as a type of liquid solution, humans as molecules, according to which societies can change state to gas-like states, slums, or solid-like states, which he describes as metropolises, and he employs advanced concepts such as fugacity. So you're the only person in the whole world who's ever had a social fugacity theory, which is very unique, because fugacity is a very difficult concept. So for you to apply fugacity sociologically is a very advanced theory. And he uses human chemical reaction theory, free energy, activation energy barrier, among others. And so I've only read 25 pages so far, but I have a feeling when digested, he will rank highly in future retrospect in the social Newton rankings. So only after reading 25 pages, I knew your book was going to be very, very famous.
You are telling me.
I already knew.
I did not know.
Oh, yeah. Because I read, this is already after writing 3,000 articles and writing over 1,000 works of over 1,000 people. So when I see something that has genius in it, I knew only on the first 25 pages that you had a lot of genius in your book. So.
What should I do? Should I reward you with something?
You don't give me I have already more than a reward enough just talking to you right now. I have plenty of reward. My pot of gold is this big already. So now we're going to go through the book. Now, for everybody at home, when I read through the book, I didn't know that I read Mirza's book as I do any other book. I write comments such as good, very good, curious, interesting, if they're good comments. And then if they're not good comments I don't like, I write this is stupid or very stupid. And so it's nothing, when you see these, nothing personal against you, but it's just my way of reading from my own mind. Things I like, I don't like, so I don't go over them again. So when you see the annotations here, that's my own pencil, but when I read this, I didn't realize that it was going to be so influential to me that I would be going to meet Mirza. So that's what no disrespect to you, just my way of doing for my own mind, you understand? So
I forgive you.
You're funny. You're a funny person. Let's see. Published by Hamd. Who is this? How did you get in contact with this press? Hamdard Foundation Press. That's a friend of yours.
The Hakim Saeed was in that ceremony.
Oh, okay.
He's the owner of this foundation.
So now you dedicate the book to your wife.
My daughter.
To
Mumtaz is my daughter.
Ishrat Jabin,
is my wife.
Uma Tazin, your daughter, and Farouk, who I met yesterday, Amir, your son. Yeah, okay.
Mumtaz.
Where's your daughter?
Your
daughter is gone?
He's the son of my daughter, Mumtaz.
Huh? She lives in
Arsalan, yes. Who was sitting here.
Oh.
He is the son of my daughter, Mumtaz.
Okay. All right. Now, forward by a scientist. So now who is this? I want to know who is this M.A. Kazi? Who is this person? Who is this person?
He was the minister in charge at that time.
What was his background in science?
Jameel Kazi.
What's his first name?
Mumtaz Kazi.
What type of science background did he have? He was a scientist?
He was a scientist. He was also my teacher.
What type of science did he study?
He was an organic chemist.
Oh, okay.
Organic chemist.
What university was he associated with? He was University of Karachi? Karachi University.
No, DJ College.
Huh? He was a professor.
He was a lecturer there at that time. Then he went for he obtained his degree, PhD degree from Cambridge University.
Oh, okay. So he says, let's see, man's observation of natural phenomenon have fascinated him throughout recorded history, and have provided him a base for development of theoretical ideas. He has sought similarities occurring in two different systems, the social and the natural, and has attempted to derive corollaries in support of his theories. The interpretation of atomic structure in terms of the solar system by Bohr, the structure of benzene ring on the basis of the model of a snake with its tail in its mouth by Keppel, and the determination of the density of the loss of weight of a body and its immersion in water by Archimedes are some such examples where the latter observations were superimposed on the former system to arrive at an accepted solution of complex phenomena. So then, the book New Dimensions in Sociology, a Physico-Chemical Approach to Human Behavior by Dr. Mirza Arshad Ali Beg is a new approach in which he has tried to establish an interface between physical-chemical and the social sciences. It makes an interesting reading and provides a basis to quite a few socialization processes like assimilation, migration, and mind-body split. So this one we'll talk about a little later, mind-body split. I think that's when you mean when a person...
Hypocrisy.
They what?
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
My body is hypocrisy.
It's an example of hypocrisy. Yeah, okay. Give me, what's one example that comes to mind? Like a politician who says, don't, this is bad, but they do it?
Words and deeds are two different things.
Huh?
For hypocrites, words and deeds.
Words and deeds are different. Yeah.
Are different.
Oh, okay. I get you. Okay. So then he says, human behavior comprises a series of reversible and irreversible processes involving interactions of fellow humans under the constraints of the environment. So he does a pretty good job here. So now we're here. One may appreciate the author's analogy and his hypothesis on the driving force of free energy being responsible for the sudden burst of energy among the Arabs after the appearance of the apostle of God. So this is one question I have here is when you use the word analogy. Analogy means
allegory,
huh?
similarity.
But do you believe that it's true? If you believe that it's not, if you believe that the Gibbs entered the driving force and the free energy is responsible for the sudden burst of energy, then it's not an analogy. It would be a truth. It is the driving force. So do you believe that it's analogy, similarity, or do you believe that is the energy?
Yeah. That's what I mean. And the free energy or driving force, whatever has happened, whatever may have happened, is because of the driving force that has been developed.
Okay, so let me show you one. Okay, so now here we are. So, here we have the Greek before. Here we have the rise, sudden burst of energy with the Greeks, the Aristotle and Archimedes, Plato, and then Roman started. The fall of Rome occurred here, and there were some dark ages. Now, you say about 600 AD, there was a rise called the Islamic Golden Age, where there's a large number of Middle Ages geniuses that shone brightly. But that stopped about 1258 during the Mongol siege of Baghdad. So you're saying during this period, there was a sudden burst of energy, and the driving force for that energy was the Gibbs free energy. And you say, but do you say that is just an analogy, or that was the measure of the energy, is the Gibbs free energy? So do you say analogy means that it's not? Do you believe that it's just similar to the energy, or do you believe that it is the energy?
Yeah, analogy is almost similar to having one example superimposed on the other.
Okay, but
this is something analogous to whatever has happened.
Okay, but here's the this is very for a lot of people who do these theories, you have to be very clear on when you use analogy. So for me, for example, when I write my book, Human Chemical Thermodynamics, I explain that the Gibbs free energy shown here, it's the measure of an isothermal isobaric system on the surface of the Earth.
Yeah.
Whether it be the energy in a small beaker or it be the energy in a social beaker. And I say it's not an analogy, it is the energy. So some people, some people might dismiss your whole book and say your whole book is just an analogy, which means you don't believe what you're doing. You think it's only just a similarity, and you're just thinking like the Earth is.
Analogy is more than similarity. I think analogy is something real being imposed on some other thing that is also real.
Okay. Let me ask a question a different way. So, during this Islamic Golden Age, where there was a burst of energy, as you say, where the Middle Eastern society transformed into a bright society, or what you call ideal solution society.
Mm.
So that energy, what is the name of the energy? Is it gravitational energy, or is it the Gibbs free energy, or you're saying it's just an analogy to the energy?
In that case, it is the occult energy versus something real. What would you call the free energy?
So you believe that the energy of this transformation is the free energy? It's physical-chemical free energy.
Here it was occult energy.
Occult.
Occult.
Huh? What's the word?
Intuitive.
Huh?
Intuitive.
Intuitive?
Intuition.
Intuition?
Yeah. Intuitional energy. Occult energy. Something.
Energy of the mind?
Energy of the mind.
Oh, okay.
Blessing.
Huh?
Blessings from somewhere.
Presence, okay. But if we measure the energy, if we were scientifically energy, the social energy,
let's call it a brain wave.
Brainwave, okay.
Yeah.
But the name of the energy is the free energy.
The occult energy is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And free energy is the driving force. Driving force. That is the mind itself.
All right, well, let's go.
Free energy is something real. Something real. Free energy is something real.
Real.
That is the driving force.
It's a real energy.
Occult energy is still in the developing stage. It's still in the mind.
Okay.
The mind gives you the free energy. Yes, gives you the driving force. Gives you the key for the driving force.
What about this one here? The strength
Appears to be
The strength of a society is explained in terms of molecular association. So by this you mean you model human associations in terms of molecular association, correct? And disassociation. For life seems to be ultimately molecular. So
molecular association and dissociation. This is what I learned.
Mm-hmm. So you
in chemistry, association and dissociation. Something real you can demonstrate that this is association.
So when you
water is a good example of association.
Okay, so for example, let's use the example in society of what about how's the example of when Pakistani formed as a state from India? So the Muslim Indians formed Pakistan, so they disassociated from the Hindu Indians and formed a molecular disassociation, right? When Pakistan was formed, you think of that separation in terms of molecular association and dissociation, right?
This subject is there in the chapter on assimilation.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, so we'll get to that.
We'll go there.
Yeah, we'll get there. But I just want to just understand your.
But association.
Yeah, I just want to understand the word here, molecular.
Association and dissociation are two different things.
Oh yeah, so association come together.
Association is here,
and then
dissociation is this.
Yeah, I understand. So my question is though, you view people molecularly in terms of kind of like big molecules, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Hindu population or the Muslim population has dissociated from the Hindu population. Mm-hmm. It was all right until quite some time.
Well, maybe we can talk when we get to the chapter. We'll talk about it. So how about this one? You're forwarded by a sociologist. So who is this sociologist? Who is this Jameel?
He was the vice chancellor of Karachi University.
He was what?
Vice chancellor of Karachi University. This man, Jalibi.
Okay. And his background was in sociology. He was a professor of sociology.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see what he says.
He was in the scene for quite some time in Karachi.
Let's see. He was your teacher, or he was your friend?
Not my teacher. Not my teacher, but he was an associate.
Okay. So he says, New Dimensions by Mirza Beg is laudable and a bold step to interpret and identify several concepts in terms of physico-chemical analysis. He has painstakingly dealt with concepts like migration, affinity, etc. in the context of physico-chemical analysis. He says the scientific study of society and its concepts with such approaches will enhance and acquire more authenticity and reliability in data and study of sociology. So this is where you want, when you talk...
This interprets my interpretation.
Yeah, so...
I've been trying to interpret these terms of physico-chemical analysis.
So when you asked me yesterday about how do we get this this type of subject established in University of Karachi, like how do we get this departments going? Oh, there he is right there, the big man right there, yes sir. Welcome to the interview.
How are you?
Real good. Say a few words in front of the camera here.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are. You're Mirza's.
My name is Mirza Faizan Beg. I'm by profession a human resource guy, and I'm helping both of these guys to develop the for Libb's work, and we're really thankful to Libb for being here in Pakistan. We are very excited, and we're working together. So kudos.
Thank you. So let's see here. So this one here is This is one of the big problems in the field right now, because I'll draw a diagram here. So you have sociology. So here we have the modern university. Now we have the sociology department. They're in a separate part of the university, and then we have the physical sciences and the chemistry department and the engineering department. And between the two, there is a wall, and they don't talk to each other. There's no communication backwards and forth. So if you go to a physicist or a chemist or anywhere in any university in the world, give or take, they'll tell you if you do this, they're going to say, if you bring this concept, they're going to say, the sociology department deals with this subject. Go talk to them. And then if you go to the sociology department, they're going to say, they're either going to say, this is just an analogy, or it's too confusing. We don't understand these concepts. They go over our head. So this is where in order to get this across the world for everybody else who's watching, there has to be interaction, two-way interaction, and communication between the sociology department and backwards in terms of the physics and chemistry department. So they can explain sociology, professors can explain the problems they're working on, and then the physics and chemistry department can explain back to the sociology department if the terms they're using are correct, like what Mirza did in his work. So this is a model. Everybody should take note of this. Here's something. He says that we must bear in mind that the behavior of particles is being governed by physical-chemical properties, while human behavior is governed by factors originating from the mind. So, just to clarify this point here, in your book, do you view people as particles or molecules? Which one do you view people as, particles or molecules reacting?
Particles. What he is trying to say is.
He says particles don't have a mind?
Atoms,
okay.
molecules.
Okay. But you believe...
Atoms and molecules, and then the social units. The
social units.
The units in a social structure. The particle, for example, a molecule, and the behavior of a molecule is being interpreted into the behavior of the human behavior is being interpreted in terms of the particles.
Okay.
Which is a dehumanized of the entity.
Okay, but let me ask the question a different way. In terms of this word here, governed, you believe that the particles, atoms, and molecules at the small level...
Particles are being governed by physico-chemical laws.
And thermodynamics.
We consider the particles as dehumanized human being.
But my question is...
The human being has a mind. The particle or the molecule or a molecular entity is dehumanized.
Okay. But
it doesn't have a brain.
Okay, but the question is, you believe everything in the universe is governed by thermodynamics, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's saying here the sociologists saying that they're governed by two different laws. So, but in your view, you believe that everything in the universe, the small particles and the humans, are both governed by thermodynamics, correct?
By thermodynamics.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Now, the difference is that the human being has a mind, and the particle has no mind.
Oh, okay. I'll give you. Let me show you a quick diagram. How I understand this. It's called the ABC model. Okay, so here we have a model where we have this is called retinal, and it's a molecule that's in the back of your eye, and when light shines on it, between the 11 and 12 carbon bonds, the molecule sort of has a small mind, and it reacts to the light and it changes into the excited state, which is the straight position. So it goes from being the bent position when it has a visual sense of light of a certain wavelength, and it becomes animated. But when the light goes away, it changes back into the bent state. So it goes from bent configuration to straight, and this involves the photon goes in and makes the electron jump from this orbital level to the outer orbital level, and this creates a instability in the 11-13 bond and creates animation. So this is a principle where we see the formation of a mind, which creates an animated molecule. So this is where do you agree with this? Or not? You're done. So.
I think it's fair enough.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So, okay. This is where you would differentiate between when you jump from you were talking about the particle is dehumanized, but at a certain level, when you get up to about 3 elements added, the mind starts to develop. So here you get the retinal, which is animated. These are what's classified as animate things. So, for example, Alfred Ubihold, he's a thermodynamicist. You know who he is? He wrote animate matter is termed life for short. He wrote this in his book Time and Thermodynamics. So at a certain level of scale of complexity, you get animate matter, and mind gets developed. So you'll get things like this here. So here's the retinal molecule, and this is a 3-element molecule, and it has animation when light shines on it. And this is called DTA. This is a walking molecule, which has 14 carbon atoms, 10 hydrogen atoms, 2 sulfur atoms, and the sulfur hydrogen tails are its A and B, or its legs. So when you heat the molecule, it walks across the surface of silicon, I think it is. In the same way, we have AQ. These are molecules synthesized in laboratory. So AQ is a molecule that carries bundles of carbon dioxide like a person carrying a package. So this is kind of up to scale where you get, and then you have human here is a 26-element molecule. So what is your, this is reasonable to you? Where you get, the mind starts to develop, where you get the going from one particle, hydrogen atom doesn't have a mind because it has no animation, it doesn't move. But once you start adding more molecules, you get more properties of animation. But across all of these, the thermodynamics applies to their movement. That's correct?
It's nearly enough.
Thermodynamics governs all the movements?
What I'm thinking is that the retina receives the message. It receives the message, transmits it to the brain. The brain is the processing factory. The activated complex is produced here.
The what complex is here?
Activated complex.
Activated complex.
That way. The activated complex is formed here. And then here, in order to accept an idea or to process the idea, a certain certain dimension. There are number of what you call them, the degrees of freedom. There are a number of degrees of freedom.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you're open-minded. Like
Yeah.
you learned from the.
You have to lose a certain degree. If you do not lose a certain degree of freedom,
Yeah.
the degree of freedom is seeing. Believing is not yet.
Yeah, I understand what you're
Seeing,
saying.
touch,
I'm going to have to.
hearing. These are the various degrees of freedom.
We'll get to that when you get to one of your chapters on degrees of freedom. We'll talk about that. What about this question here? He says, if it could stand the test of time, your ideas presented will rediscover new frontiers in sociology and will revolutionize existing theories of human behavior as it has so far been propounded by philosophers. So my question is how many years from now do you think the revolution will happen?
How many?
How many
years from now the revolution is going to happen?
How many?
How many
Like
years?
a century?
कितने साल बाद?
10 years?
Sadi,
100 years?
How many
years? How many
years?
Yeah. How many years would it take to, the revolution to happen?
Kind of like the Copernican Revolution. Before Copernicus, Nicholas Copernicus, they used to believe
It should not. If the message has reached you, in that case, the whole thing it has started nucleating.
How many years?
People just have to listen to you.
Okay, but let's say people look back in the future and they call it the Big Revolution, or they call it the Goethe Revolution. From like now, we look back 400 years later, and we call the Copernican Revolution was the work of Nicholas Copernicus in the years 400 years ago, and he changed the minds of people. They used to believe that the Earth, everything revolved around the Earth was here, and the sun went around the Earth. And now we believe that the sun is here, and the Earth goes around the sun, and there's different suns in the universe. But the revolution didn't happen in 1 year. It took 200 or 300 years. And now we look back, we call it the Copernican Revolution. So how many years into the future do you think historically people will look back on us in the room here talking and call this the Physico-Chemical sociological revolution? How many years from now will this take place, do you think? The way we look back at Copernicus.
It will take just as many years as as have passed between writing this book and the message reaching you. 1987.
30 years?
2030.
40 years from now.
30 years?
20 to 30 years?
20 to 30 years, things are going to go.
Now we get this one.
One generation.
One generation?
One generation.
Yeah, I think you're a little optimistic myself. And me myself, I think it's going to at least take 100 to 300 years.
See,
no, I don't think it will take 100 years.
If we actually,
People
take
are-
that geometric progression thing in mind, the time it took for Copernicus to make the change happen, it was too large. And then the Newtonian thing, it didn't take that kind of time.
Yeah.
So if we think in that direction, maybe he's right.
Okay. But look at this statement he says here. He said,
let me tell you, like the German proverb say, a lie has to be spoken 100 times to make it true.
Yeah.
So this message has not been spoken
enough.
100 times.
Yeah.
If we have people like you, and they speak like that 100 times, then it will take only 100 years, 100 days, not 100 years.
For me, I think we need more people everywhere like you.
Yes.
In every
The
country.
message has not reached everybody.
You know, if we have 144 countries, we should have 144 people like you.
Yeah.
At least resonating something like it.
Let me give you one second point of view that's caught in this quote right here.
Yeah.
He says, the sociologist says it demands adequate knowledge of physical chemistry. So one of the things that's holding the revolution back is I didn't see this until I actually got a degree in chemical engineering.
Yeah.
And so you can't just go study these simple subjects. You have to study, get up to the level of physical chemistry before you can see the thing the way I see it and the way Mirza sees it. That's why I think the revolution is going to take a little longer. Because you need more education.
Can we help it with animations and we can actually simplify the
there's things that can help.
So probably that would help.
Yeah.
When he says Libb, when he says physical chemistry, he's only talking about thermodynamics.
Yeah. Okay.
If the messages on thermodynamics can reach everybody, the moment when people start thinking about thermodynamics, then the message has reached them.
Mm-hmm.
So it will take just as much time as people will take to understand thermodynamics.
Okay.
Because thermodynamics is what is calling most of those things.
That's another problem because thermodynamics is chemical thermodynamics is one of the most difficult subjects in the most difficult subject in all of knowledge.
So which page have we reached as yet?
Right now we did first we gave background to everything, explained how there's 500 human thermodynamicists, there's 40 human free energy theorists, and there's about 6 human chemical reaction theorists, which is Mirza and myself, and we talked about his education, the first lectures he went to in 1974, and now we're starting to go into the introduction here. So who is Mr. Mumtaz? What was his first name again? Name of Mumtaz? First name? Mr. Mumtaz was quite polarizing. What's his first name? First name?
First name.
Mumtaz's first name?
Mumtaz.
Second is Ahmad.
Ahmad.
Ahmed.
I need to write these down because when I go back and write the article, I'm going to write reference. I need to know names. Everything has to be very specific. That's why this encyclopedia grows so big. Because every time I find one word, now I have to write an article on Mr. Mumtaz, and that takes more pages. But once you get all the pieces together, it's much better.
Very nice approach and learning a lot actually.
What is your opinion here about Heisenberg uncertainty principle? What are you trying to say in the statement? He says that. He says, the way I understand this, you're referencing Mr.
Actions and reactions taking place within as well as on and to all of these, the uncertainty principle is the factor.
You believe that the uncertainty principle applies to social interactions, measurements?
Those social reactions, many of those social reactions that may be common between you and me could be predicted, but there is a certain uncertainty always.
Why?
Uncertainty in obtaining the same view all the time.
Yeah. This point I disagree with you on this. I think you're wrong on this one.
The two of us may be thinking of the same thing, but each time that you will agree with me depends on the uncertainty. As uncertainty.
Yeah, this one I disagree with you on this.
What's your premise? What do you think?
Well, how do you explain?
A plus B is not always likely to give AB. A plus B could be AB, BA, ABB, BBBA. So there is this uncertainty in obtaining AB all at once, every time.
Okay, but let me explain.
Yeah, actually like to hear from you. What you say?
Because I've come across the same strategy maybe dozens of times. People who use Heisenberg they want to use it in argument. So from my understanding, Heisenberg principle only applies to the measurements of particle that are less than the wavelength of light. So say you have an electron and you're measuring the electron. Because the electron is so small, you have to send a wavelength of light, or say you're measuring a proton that's inside of the atom. The wavelength, to measure the proton, you have to send a light here, it hits it, and then the light bounces off, and so you have one device that measures here, you have another device that measures here. So to measure the momentum and the position of the particle, when you shine the light on it to go to these two receptors, the light hitting it is going to move it a little bit like this. And that's why you're going to have uncertainty in the measurement. So the reason why this can't apply sociologically is because humans have movement. They have wave movements too. For example, when people go to work and they come home, they go to the grocery store, they come home, they go to the beach and come home. Humans move in a circle like this in their daily movements. But the light we use to measure, for example, you can use GPS tracking on your phone to measure your position. So the wavelength for human movements is several miles compared to the wavelength of light. So the light hitting a human to measure the human is greater in scale than what's compared to the Heisenberg.
Then there's almost about human interactions also.
Yeah.
And the brain, the thought process of one agreeing with the thought process of another.
Yeah.
So there is always an uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the particle, it could be an idea. This idea and this idea, they may not be coincident each time.
Mm-hmm.
There is always an uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that uncertainty, like in the case of the particle and the wave, is true in the case of should be similar.
Here's a cartoon of it here. This is the psychologist, and this guy's trying to explain his problems in his life. And he says, the psychologist says, but you cannot go through life applying Heisenberg's uncertainty principle to everything. So a lot of people, they have the habit of overly applying. Yeah.
To this, we certainly agree.
Okay.
But humans do tend to behave in different manner. That's why actually
Let's just take a look at these. This is people who wrote books on the whole thing. So George Strodach, he says the Heisenberg principle is irrelevant to ethical questions, particularly the question of human freedom.
Mm-hmm.
He says, for a concise and excellent discussion of the Heisenberg principle and its irrelevance to ethics, see Louis Beck's 1952 Philosophical Inquiry. So I didn't read either of these books, or maybe this article, but I did read his whole book. Dean Whitridge, he's an engineer. He wrote the book called The Mechanical Man, A Physical Basis of Intelligent Life.
Yeah.
And he says, even the existence among the laws of a principle of indeterminacy, limiting the precision with which the future can be predicted, does not permit the entry of caprice into the world of the physical sciences. With a calculable and frequently very narrow range of uncertainty, the future is completely determined by the past. Given the laws and the particles, all else inexorably follows. But and you can read more on this. If you want to see the anecdote here, I don't know if you know who Steven Weinberg is. He's the person. You know how there's 4 forces in the universe now? Gravitational force. There's the electromagnetic force. There's the weak nuclear force. He's the one that discovered.
And the strong force.
He's the one that discovered won the Nobel Prize for the weak nuclear force. So he made a whole anecdote about this. People who apply the Heisenberg principle to social phenomena as kind of a way, like a loophole, that you can say, well, the Heisenberg principle says we'll never know for sure. So he says there's positivist is the Tiny Tim, and Scrooge is the real. Let me see if I can get this right. Here he's talking about the Copernican interpretation of quantum mechanics. Humans play an essential role in giving meaning to the wave function by the act of measurement. Well, he's got a whole dialogue here. We'll waste too much time if we go over it. But this is something, if anybody wants to go,
I do want to go.
Yeah, just type, you read his whole book there, and he's got the, we'll try to get back to lecture, but.
I think we will have to agree on this last sentence. Qualitatively it is always possible. But when you go for quantification, then you will have to bring in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, or whoever's uncertainty principle.
Yeah.
It should be possible. Qualitatively, yes. Quantitatively, there is always an uncertainty.
Yeah, but in my opinion, that's only at the small level, and doesn't. Once you get up to a certain scale, it doesn't apply anymore. Maybe I'm incorrect about this, but the 3 or 4 examples I gave you are 3 or 4 people you can see.
No, you're making sense.
Quite a few natural phenomena are so well known that one wonders why the degree of universality of phenomenon has not been identified out of the observations starting from the atomic and molecular level, the small level, to the distribution of the celestial bodies. So we're in between the small level and the celestial body. So you're wondering why this has never been done before. That's correct?
Yeah, that's it. What is applying at the molecular level, that means that the pico or the nano or pico environment, that those laws should be the same. The laws governing the system and in the pico environment should also hold for the cosmos. That's what I mean. And I have that book, Life Processes, Health and Aging and Disease, and there I'll give you a copy.
So you mean which laws in particular? The laws of thermodynamics. The first and second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Should apply at the pico level and the celestial level and the social level.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
And there also, I've divided that book into those dimensions, the pico environment and the nano environment, the macro environment and micro environment.
So let's say about this. This is just introduction, just so everybody knows. The main theme in Mirza's book is solution theory. So he uses solution chemistry, where solid particles get dissolved into solution, as a way to model society. So let's just explain here. The solvent he considers to be the main society, and an immigrant is the solid or solid particle that gets dissolved into society. So you got this idea from the changes that happened in Pakistan, where a lot of people migrated out of Pakistan, and a lot of during the dangerous years. And you say Pakistan. We'll look at your graphs in your book, your tables, and you say that Pakistan had one of the most largest immigrations to other countries like United Arab Emirates and to England compared to other countries because of the instability. And we talk about social pressure, so we'll cover that. This is a good point here. The affinity of chemical substances was considered by Newton not to be exactly similar to those of the human beings, but empirical observations and the nature of attraction in the form of kinship were already known during his time. So what do you know about Newton and the affinities? What is your bet? What did you
Considered by Newton not to be exactly similar to those of human behavior. He also said about affinity, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Affinity of chemical substance was considered by Newton not to be exactly the same.
Newton was the person that founded affinity chemistry. In 1718, he published his last and final query, was called Query 31. So he wrote, well, we can probably take a look at this right now, so I'll show you how this all fits in. Because Newton, he wrote his Principia on the laws of motion of the heavenly, of the mechanics of movements of stars. And then his second book was Optics. And then he started publishing more editions of his Optics when he was getting late in age. And then at the end of his book, he wrote what are called queries, or questions. And he wrote 31 questions that he couldn't solve, but he wanted to have solved in the future. So his last and final query was about chemical affinities. And so he took 6 different chemicals, and he ranked them in terms of which one would mix with which one. But then if you introduced a third this chemical, it would knock off one of the bonds, and it would form a stronger concept. And he kept saying if you drop this chemical in, it would knock this one off because it had a weak affinity and form a newer, stronger bond. So he developed a scale of affinity, and that's where in 1718, this French chemist named Geoffroy Tyne translated these words that Newton had into the first affinity table. So I'll show you a quick, and that's where this whole subject of affinity comes from. So before Newton, there was a little bit of people that would talk about, some of the older alchemists would talk about affinity a little bit, as attraction, likes and dislikes, but Newton was the one that founded the whole subject. So he published this whole theory in 1718, and this is the query right here, and I'll show you the main, how he writes this. So early on he says, in 1686 he says, I wish we could derive the rest of the phenomenon of nature by the same kind of reasoning from the mechanical principles, for I'm induced by many reasons to suspect that they all depend upon certain forces by which the particles of bodies, by some causes hitherto unknown, are either mutually impelled towards each other and cohere in regular figures, or are repelled and recede from each other. So he started working on this in his mind in 1686. And then by the time he got to his Query 31, he started writing, changing editions of his Optics. 1704 he had 16 queries, and then he had, by this year he had 23 queries, and by the final publication he had 31 queries or questions. So the 31st query is his, so there's the query right here. So he says, is it not for a want of attractive virtue between the particles of water and oil, or of quicksilver? So these are two things bonded. This is the quicksilver and this is the mercury. And they're bonded in a thing. And antimony, and of lead and iron, that these substances do not mix, and by a weak attraction that quicksilver and copper mix difficultly, and from a strong one that quicksilver and tin, antimony and iron and water and salts mix readily. So he develops a scale of why things mix, kind of like what Big does. So then Geoffroy took what he's doing here, he took this verbal paragraph and he wrote this into this affinity table right here. And it was published in the French. So he took this scale here. So this top row is right here is where somewhere doing some paragraph is written. This top row is called the main species, and every row below this are the species with which that could react with the top species, the main reactant. So this one is, so the weaker affinities are at the bottom, so that if this species is bonded with this one in a bond, that if you introduce a higher species into the mix, this one will be displaced and this one will form the bond with this one. But then if you have this one and this one in the bond, this one has a stronger affinity for the top species. So if you introduce this into the solution, it will kick off this species. And then similarly, this one has the strongest affinity. So if this one is bonded to this one in the solution, and you introduce this species right here, because it has stronger affinity, it will kick off the third species. So what we have here is a scale of affinities. And this was how affinity chemistry got started.
So how do we understand the symbology?
So what's the question?
The question is, how do we understand the symbology?
The symbols?
Yeah.
Those are just how they called chemicals back then, little symbols.
Mm-hmm.
So one would be...
Is there a index of
Yeah, you can. There's
symbology in your website?
Yeah, you go here, and then you can even watch. If you look at my lecture I gave in Romania, I pulled out this guy named Torben Bergman made the biggest one, and they had this whole spread out sheet of the whole things. So if you go down here to, so here's one. Quicksilver is this symbol. But the lectures are right here. If you go down, so after Jeffrey made his table, people started making bigger and bigger affinity tables.
Okay, so he introduced the table and other people.
Yeah, so you see how they keep getting bigger? Gillard had one in 1750 this big. And then Rudiger had one. So they started getting bigger. But the biggest one was Torben Bergman's. So this is the biggest one here. This is Bergman's affinity table. And you see here that it's he's got ones for the wet wave and dry wave. So if you click on here, Bergman's affinity table, there's Bergman's reaction diagrams, and there's also Bergman's symbols explained. That's right here. So here's Bergman's affinity table. He's got reactions in the wet way. These are aqueous reactions here. Then he has reaction in the moist way, and he's also got reaction in the dry way. So you see where he has chemical signs explained?
Wow.
This is where you, this symbol for vitriolic acid. So a lot of these, this is the symbol for zinc, but now we call it just ZN. So this was over 300 years. This was what's called the alchemical symbols. Now we have the periodic table symbols. And you see Mercury's down here. But you can go check out, there's, if you go over here, on the side page right here, you can see, click on this, like Bergman's chemical signs explained, and there's a drop menu that'll explain where everything is. But I'll just show you how this got, I'll show you how Goethe wrote his book here.
So what do I write? EOHT?
Yeah, EOHT.info, affinity table, affinity tables. EOHT.info, that's the main key.
Yeah.
And then you write affinity tables. This is what Goethe did. So Goethe took his, Goethe took the principles that Bergman just wrote, and he arranged people. And so you could, these are the main reactants, these are the main reactants at the top row, just like Jeffrey did and Newton explained. And the ones in the second row you have the most affinity with. And then as you go down, you have less and less affinity with people. And so each of the chapters in the book, and for example, when you talk about catalyst, Mirza,
yes,
he uses Midler as the catalyst. And I've got a picture of him somewhere. Midler looks like this. Midler, the mediator. So when he comes into the state, he rides on his horseback in, and he goes and talks to people, and he'll solve marital problems, or if people are arguing about disputes like whether new business should form, he'll come and talk to them. And in Goethe's mind, he was the catalyst, or the human catalyst in his novel. And he's in one of the chapters in the book. So the problem was here that some of these reactions, if you read through his book, for example, the Count and Baroness in the book, they come visit the state sometimes, but I think Midler doesn't like they have a negative affinity with Count and Baroness. So anytime they get word, say Miller is visiting at the estate, but he gets word that Count and Baroness are coming. So even before they get to the estate, like a day ahead of time, he says, "Oh, I'm leaving. I can't stay here anymore," because don't have any affinity.
Affinity. Yes.
Affinity is the force of the chemical reaction.
Yeah.
So force, after 1882, it was proved that the measure of these interpersonal forces was the Gibbs free energy. So again, the difference between, if you have a particle like this, it could either be a molecule, human, it has a certain mass, and then a force moves it through unit distance.
Yeah.
So then the work, and this is the distance moved here. So the work involved, or the energy, equals the force times the distance. So over here you have this is the affinities. And now we have the energy. So before 1882, chemists measured all of these reactions in terms of these chemical affinities. And then after 1882, Helmholtz proved there's a whole history lesson on this. First it was called the thermal theory of affinities. And there's chemists that argued, well, the measure of these affinities is the amount of heat that's given out in the reactions. But they found that there were some reactions that got cold. If you put certain chemicals together, there are some reactions where the beaker actually gets cold on the outside and freezes. So that shows that disproved the thermal theory of affinity.
Thermal theory of affinity.
Thermal theory of affinity, yeah. So then Helmholtz came along and he disproved all this. He showed through proofs and experiments that it's the measure of not the heat given off in the reaction. So you can have a lot of heat between, let's say, between a man and a woman in a relationship, but that's not the measure of the affinity, because sometimes the reaction could get cold. Rather, it's the measure of the free energy of the system. So that's how it all got changed. So Goethe did all this stuff in terms of affinities, and then so it's unique to find when we find Mirza's book, him talking about chemical affinities and free energies in the same book. It's very rare. Maybe 4 or 5 people in the whole world have talked like this, explained at the social level. Oh yeah, here we are. So this is where you're talking about. This is a very large subject. I had to read maybe 3 or 4 books on the history of affinity chemistry to even understand this statement. So Mirza is good for even being able to put these pieces together. And he says there are scores of evidences which suggest that human beings interact with one another because of the affinities they may have or may not have for one another, just like chemical substances. See, this is a very, very powerful statement right here. When people read this, they're going to be reading it over and over again. So then you say, based on the concept of affinity, it should be possible to suggest a mechanism for socialization of the human species. The driving force of the reaction is another observation that could be related to the speed with which human interactions nucleate and either result in a revolution or in the domination of one faith over the other. So this is very good logic we have here.